Okay, and we are recording. And just for your knowledge as well, the chat box is also being recorded, so be mindful of what you drop in there. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. I think that most of you on know me, and we have engaged in some way or form. I founded the Tall Society 5 years ago now, a little over 5 years ago now. And the Tall Society is absolutely my firstborn baby, I would call it. And I'm blessed to have connected with all of you through that platform. In addition to that, I'm also a Black woman in love with a Black man living in the United States during a time that can really only be called an absolute crisis. And I call this out because I think that we all, people of color specifically, have unique stories that we want to share with you today. And hopefully we'll end up with a better mutual understanding of what being Black in America, in my case, or really anywhere in the world, truly means. So yesterday night, as I was preparing for this town hall, I was online and I was reminded that yesterday would have been Tamir Rice's 18th birthday. And I'm sure that that name rings a bell for most of you. And today we're speaking his name to make sure that he's never forgotten. But just to remind you all of what transpired a couple of years ago, Tamir was 12 years old. He was a baby. And every time I see his picture and I see his face, my heart breaks. And he was playing in a park with a toy gun, and he was gunned down by a police officer. And what's interesting is this police officer that gunned him down really within seconds of arriving, he didn't do any sort of validating or truly looking at what was ongoing. This police officer had previously been deemed emotionally unstable and unfit for duty by a police force in the same area, which to me is absolutely shocking. And he was hired on to the Cleveland police force nevertheless. And I think that that office never even bothered to review his previous personnel file. So this is someone being hired in the role of a police officer in the United States, which is absolutely shocking, right? That validation of his history was not done. There are too many examples of people of color losing their lives, but also being mistreated, experiencing both physical, mental, emotional abuse, people of color being passed up for promotions, being underestimated, which happens to me all the time, especially in corporate America, or just plainly being ignored and their opinion not being valued. And I can go on and on about the injustices that we face. But I know that I speak for every person of color when I say that we're exhausted and we're done. We're over it. Enough is enough. At the same time, I also believe that change will only come if each and every person does their part. And I recognize that in that we all play different roles and in shifting the paradigm, hopefully. I understand that, you know, not everyone might be comfortable to grab the megaphone during a demonstration and take the lead, but you can still attend and listen and be present. Not everyone might have the means to donate, but you can still volunteer your time to organizations and causes that further how people of color are being treated in your respective countries. There's a lot of ways that you can be an active part of change, and that's really why we're here today. So I want to tell you a little bit about what the intent is and for this town hall. So most of you have seen me share resources on social platforms. I did an Instagram Live with Valerie, and needless to say, I felt very much compelled to continue the conversation and also bring you into that conversation beyond our interactions on social media. I believe that this is the time for our tall community to come together and to lock arms and be an active part of the change and the way forward. And as influencers, brands, and retailers, every single person here today has an audience of some sort or a customer of some sort. And you have a responsibility to those people. But you also have a responsibility to your families, to your children, to your fellow humans, to us. And to illustrate how much work there is still to be done, I think that some of you probably have noticed some interesting responses to me sharing Black Lives Matter content over the recent weeks. It's interesting how I've been told numerous times over the last couple of weeks by different tall sisters to just stick to my tall topics, to just stick to what I do best, you know, continue sharing resources, go ahead and continue to host brunches, but please stop talking about race and racism. I've gotten direct messages from tall sisters in response to some of my posts saying, all lives matter. Stop saying Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. And infuriating to some extent. But at the same time, I was not surprised by some of those reactions and responses. I even anticipated them, to be honest, because as a Black woman, these experiences were not isolated to just the past couple of weeks. I know that they were not the first, and they certainly will not be the last. But I want you to think about that and about those experiences that I just shared, because to me, that is a classic example of individuals that have the privilege and the luxury to not have to worry or think about how people of color are being treated around the world. So they have a complete lack of empathy and disregard that the community that they are part of, the person they're responding to with these asks of stopping mention of racism or any sort of social justice topic, they're speaking to a Black woman. And I built this community, yet you have the balls to contact me and ask me to stop. Needless to say, I'm not going to stop. And for those of you that know me a little bit better, if anything, that has only added fuel to my fire to continue this conversation, because beyond being a community of tall women, we are individuals with influence, and I think we need to think long and hard about how we exercise that influence moving forward. So today I'm joined by some amazing women, my fellow Black tall sisters who, especially during these times, have been a great sounding board. And I think I've bonded more with them over the past couple of weeks than we have over the years that we've known each other. And they've been gracious enough to come here today and share a little bit about their stories and about their beliefs. So today I really want you to listen, take notes, process what you're hearing. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about next steps later on. I'm not going to be asking any of the tall brands or bloggers that were not invited to speak to provide specifics today, but we will schedule a second town hall that will be fully dedicated to hearing from you on what action steps you have formulated to infuse change into your businesses and onto your blogs and platforms. I know that some of you have been proactive and have already published either a diversity pledge and have taken immediate steps to make a change. Some of you have privately connected with me and shared that you're uncertain on what to do next. So I think that particularly for those of you that fall into that group, I hope that today is helpful for you. And some of you that are here today, we haven't necessarily heard from you yet. I look forward to learning what you're doing moving forward, because, you know, everyone was very quick to post a black square a couple of days ago, but that is certainly not enough. So I am going to go ahead and pause there, and I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker today. Irene, all of you probably know as the founder and fearless leader of TTYA London, Taller Than Your Average London. Irene is very well known within our tall tribe, and she has personally been responsible for some of us tall sisters to look fly and to be dressed in timely and modern designs, which sometimes is very much lacking. From her personal collections that she has with TTYA London to the collaborations that she's done with ASOS and Long Tall Sally that typically sell out in days where you have to set your alarm to grab a piece. I think it is fair to say that Irene is a boss within our community, and I'm excited to have her share a little bit today. So with that, Irene, we would love to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. I just want to check everyone can hear me. Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Do I need to speak louder, or is this all good?
No, mic check works. We can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much for the introduction, Brie, and thank you so much for putting this event together. It's an honor to be able to be here today and just represent for us. I think I'll probably get started because as much as I feel like would love to assume that everybody knows a little bit about me, there's obviously going to be people on this call who don't. So I'll just kind of summarize as quickly as I can, and forgive me if I'm speaking too quick, but I know, like, you know, time, Brie wants to kind of give everybody the opportunity and have that time at the end for question and answers. So I'll try and keep it as brief and to the point as I can. So back in 2013, I started TTYA. As a means to an end, to be honest. I kind of got frustrated. I had worked at some of the biggest online retailers at the moment. I had worked within the creative space. I was a stylist for many years. I used to do all the merchandising at Selfridges. And I just kind of grew frustrated that I always had to wear like a men's double or triple XL. And lucky enough of this in the fact that I did like that kind of bohemian style. Sometimes I just wanted a maxi skirt that was a maxi skirt and not wrist or ankle swingers. So I basically started TTYA with just your basic blocks. And it kind of, I'm going to be honest with you guys, didn't expect it to take off the way it took off. I started it in my bedroom with just 7 styles. And then I was the first tall specific brand to launch in Selfridges, the first tall specific brand to launch in Barney's, New York, and open the whole tall segment for ASOS. And I think ASOS tall became the fastest market growth for them in terms of their categories. And I think trading as of last year, TTYA made ASOS, I think 1.5 million in net sales. So just goes to show that for a lot of the buyers who told me at the beginning, what, tall women really can't find clothes? Is it really that big of a deal? Yeah. So I think the kind of ecosystem and the structure underneath TTYA is, you know, I have TTYA London, which is kind of the fashion and the clothing. I have TTYA Talks, which is subdivided into 2 categories. So we have TTYA Talks, the podcast, which now kind of focuses on women who are pioneering within the creative industries and sports. And then we have TTYA Talks, the event series. Here in London, I tend to do quite big events, highlighting, especially in particularly women in color. We've collaborated with brands such as Apple Music, Beats by Dre. I've done Erykah Badu's events in London, just really kind of strongholding and promoting and elevating women of color. And that's always kind of been my ecosystem. The ethos behind TTYA is an inclusive space for the included girl, because I just felt when I came into fashion, the inclusive word and inclusive and diversity have always almost become marketing buzzwords. And I felt like brands felt by being inclusive just meant having a plus range. That was them being inclusive. They didn't think about tall, they didn't think about petite, they didn't think about, if you're going to use the word inclusive in your ethos, then that needs to be the one-stop shop for every type of woman, not just plus size. So I think for me, it was really important when I built my brand and built my business structure, how do I channel the things that are important to me into my business? Some of those things are inclusivity. So now providing this space for the excluded girl. Community, you know, there's an element of TTYA that I've had a schools project for the last 2.5 years, which go into, I don't know if any of you guys on this call are West African, but my heritage is Nigerian. And again, my mum came to the UK many years ago looking for a better future. And I think for her, in her eyes, to be successful and Black in the UK, you had to have a high academic structure. So they wanted you to be a lawyer, a doctor, you know, just big careers. And you know, fashion wasn't something that my mum would think would be a good career, you know? So I think it's been really interesting because I've kind of been the first generation with under my heritage of woman who has had kind of changed that narrative as well, and understanding that my Nigerian heritage can merge with my Nigerian heritage can merge with my Western upbringing. And I think that's something that's really important to note, because when we do talk about Black Lives Matter, I think that every corporate structure that I've worked in or had to pitch TTYA in, I would think 99% of the time, there's never been a Black person working in that structure. So if you look at everybody that I've had to collaborate with, all the brands all the houses that I've been stocked in, I've never actually on those teams had anyone Black working with them. So I think when we start to dig deeper and look at possibilities for change within TTYA, I thought, how do I embody that into my ecosystem? So for me, that has been inclusivity, community, style of the future, which is again the clothing, and then kind of breaking it down into empowerment. And I think that's where the 4 arms for me have shared the most important, and what I've kind of fed into my business. So I know when me and Bree first spoke, we weren't going to really go into specifics, but I think after the last week of, you know, everybody probably hearing about Long Tall Sally, I think it's probably fair that I can speak about it now. And not go too deep, but just kind of give a general view. So I was approached by Long Tall Sally to do a collaboration. Most of you probably saw it. I did 4 incredible seasons for them, sold out collections. It got shot by Mario Testino for America Vogue. I seeded it to all my friends through my network, artists such as Jordan Dunn, to Maya Jama, you know, to Serena Williams. Like, I had big people wearing this brand, all done through my work. And I just felt like the biggest lesson that I kind of learned when I did the collaboration is both objectives from both sides needed to be met. And when I first approached the collaboration, I saw it as an opportunity to be able to build a community within this tall frame. They've obviously been going a lot longer than I had. And I felt like, do you know what? They actually are the kind of voice for tall girls. I didn't necessarily feel like their narrative spoke to me, but I thought, well, actually, that's what a good partnership. They've got their strong points. I've got my strong points. We can come together and build. From the very beginning, I'm going to be honest with you guys. First of all, I went into the boardroom and the CEO of Long Tall Sally was literally 5 foot at maximum. So first of all, I'm talking to a 5 foot white male about tall women's clothing. So first of all, it didn't even really add up. Second of all, I felt like they already had their objectives, and maybe because I was kind of new to the game, I wasn't very clear on what my objectives were, but I definitely knew what I was bringing to the table. And I ended up having to do more than was contractually obligated, because again, if you put your name to something, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to, you want it to be successful and you want it to be good. So you're going to go above and beyond. You're going to go above and beyond to try and make sure that the collaboration is successful. But I just felt like we kind of logged heads because, again, there wasn't one person of color that worked in the building at the time when I was doing the collaboration with them. All of their infrastructure never had anybody of color on it. So I felt like, okay, they want to tap into my network, but there's nobody internally who understands this network or understands where I'm coming from. So I felt like culturally there was a big loggerhead. And same as Bree, going back to what Bree said earlier, I've really been using my platform over the last couple of weeks to really utilize my voice. And I think I called out quite a few brands at the beginning of just being like, their statements are actually not enough. We really need to make sure that their external messaging is reflected of their internal business structures. And by that, I mean, it's all well and good you saying Black Lives Matter, but actually how many Black employees do you have? How many Black employees sit on your exec board, sit on higher management? You know, you can't really have an external optics view on being anti-racist when your business structure doesn't scream that as well. So I think it's really important to note that. I feel like, again, something that's really important to me is that Black Lives Matter doesn't now become a weaponized tool or marketing tool, as I think we've been able to see across social media. You know, for the first time, I got an email from Netflix in my inbox, like top 10 Black Lives Matter movies to watch. I don't know if you guys get Now TV in the States, but, you know, it's like another streaming TV service. I got an email from Now TV. our top picks for Black Lives Matter and things that you should watch. And I'm just like, okay, this is great. We love it. Depop, another one, you know, I think in the space of 1 week, I've sent an email for, here are our amazing Black creators that you should follow. And I think for us, it's more important of just like, we don't want to be tokenized. We really want to see infrastructure and change. And that's where I think the importance can come from brands. I've lost thousands of followers, and I've also gained thousands of followers over the last couple of weeks in actually using my space to be able to speak against the media and against companies that I feel like are kind of using this as a marketing regime. And I think one thing that has been really grateful that has come out of this difficult time, because it is very traumatic, and I think you can see through people's responses on social media in particularly that, you know, it's a deeper issue. You know, a lot of us feeling like victimized, and resurfacing of injustice that we've experienced previously has re-come to the surface. And I think it's important for us to say that, you know, I don't really feel like it's our responsibility also to educate our white counterparts or employees on what it means to be, you know, a woman, a Black woman today, or a Black man today. I definitely feel like with the resources that we have in the world, it's you know, it's easy for you to research yourself, but at the same time I do feel like we do have a responsibility to share our experiences and actually speak to our white counterparts and explain certain things, because sometimes I don't necessarily always believe it's racism. Sometimes I feel like it is down to how you were raised, or you see things through you can only know what you see, you know? So sometimes I do feel like I've been very open to having conversations, but being clear that I'm not here to educate, you know? And I think that's something that's really been important for me to notice over the last couple of weeks. With Long Tall Sally, I felt like towards the end of that, I kind of felt like the collaboration wasn't really working anymore. I felt like, again, internally, the structures weren't there for it to be a culturally moving forward brand. I felt like what I challenged within their business structures, they didn't like. I was often made to feel like my voice was not important, that I was going to their building and, you know, it was on their terms because this is the way we've always done things. And my reasoning was, if this is the way you've always done things, then you don't really need me then, because if you're going to do it the way you want to do it anyway, this isn't really a collaboration. So I think how it kind of ended was me just kind of stepping away from the collaboration and just thinking, this doesn't really service me. I think that we have two very different audiences. I'm not saying that they can't interlink, but I think it's about progress, and I think about sometimes entering into a situation open and willing to talk. And I think that's why this forum is so great, because we're entering into a space where we're feeling free and confident to be able to discuss. People might not necessarily agree with some of the points that we're raising, but being able to listen and come to a mutual understanding. And I think that's what's really important with the movement and a whole. I think for me, I definitely feel like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I definitely feel like there has been a great shift. I'm not saying that we are where we need to be. I'm not necessarily saying I think we're going to get to where we need to be in my generation or in my lifetime, but I definitely feel like it's within our responsibility of my peers and our age group to set those solid foundations for the next generation. And forgive me swearing, but for the next generation to come through and fuck it up. Like, that's my mentality now, you know? How do we actually create wealth within ourselves? How do we actually make sure that our voices are heard? But actually, how do we challenge change so that the next generation can see the inconsistencies and then they layer on top of it? You know, we're not going to get it overnight, you know, but I definitely feel like we're moving in the right direction. And I also definitely feel like the time is now, you know, to challenge those brands. Like, what does diversity mean in your internal business structure? What does inclusivity mean in your internal business structure? Because unfortunately, for me to take you seriously, I can't take you seriously until I see that reflected in your internal business structure, because otherwise it just appears to be optics. It appears that you want to be seen to be diverse. You want to be seen to be inclusive. But if it's not represented in your internal business structure, then it doesn't make sense. You know, so I think that's the kind of conversations that I've been having, that I've been open to have. I think for me, I'm, like Bree said, I'm a bit of I've got my fingers in a few pies. So I'm quite lucky in the sense that, okay, I am a brand director, but I'm also a cultural consultant. And so what that means in terms of London is I work with key brands in working with them and making sure that they basically have their foot to the ground. They're culturally relevant, they're working with the right people, and they're engaging in the right communities in an authentic way. And I think that that's one thing that you can really see with TTYA. Like, I haven't been, people message me like, you don't do this and you don't do that. I'm still scaling. I think one thing that I've learned about this business is, you know, I'm one person, I can only do as much as I can, but with the right infrastructure, I hope that I'll be able to provide a better service for you guys in the tour community moving forward, but also understanding that my responsibility will be continually to have my foot to the ground, you know, and that doesn't just mean only focusing on tour fashion. That means as being in a cultural landscape, what does that mean for Black culture? What does that mean for us in popular culture? What does that mean for us in fashion? And what does that mean for us within the arts? So yeah, I don't want to ramble on too much, but I hope I've given you guys a bit more of an insight. And again, you know, I think for us to really be able to persevere and push forward, I would love to really challenge those brands on what they really have a look and what your internal business structures are and what you have in place, because it's proven that having a more diverse workforce will amplify your messaging in an authentic way. You know, it's faster in terms of thinking space, deliverables, you know, you've got all ideas, you've got everybody at the seat of that table. So I think that's a proven, you know, so all I can ask is that I've been able to implement that within my own structure, and that the other brands who are on this call can really start to think about who are they going to work with, why are you going to work with that, what is your ethos going to be, and how are you going to amplify that in an external way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Irene. Hallelujah, I would want to say. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Irene, I know that you had to, I don't know if you're going to be able to be here for questions, because I know that you have another appointment. So I want to kind of pivot and change things up a little bit, because I want to make sure that if there are questions for you, that you're able to answer those. So for anyone that is on right now, do you have any specific questions for Irene? We're going to have a question opportunity later on as well, but Irene might have to bounce to her next appointment. So is there anyone on that has a specific question or comment for Irene? I see a note from Adriana in the chat box. Fashion, it's like straight size men running plus women's clothing brands. Yep, we know that. And I just wanted to add on, it was interesting when you first met Andrew, because, you know, let's be open and talk about who we're speaking about. I had an opportunity to go visit the Long Tall Sally corporate offices a couple years ago, and I was very excited. And I had initially met with some of the marketing folks, and then I had a meeting with Andrew at the end of the day, and he is particularly short. And I will never forget that my introduction to him was, I was in the lobby with some of the marketing girls, and he walked up to me and he actually jumped up onto a bench that I was standing next to greet me. That was my introduction to the CEO of the biggest tall brands that we had. So, and you know, I think that honesty and transparency is important here. I would have probably normally been annoyed if it was anyone else, but in that context, I was so heartbroken. I was so heartbroken because he was making fun of me, like right there in the corporate office, you know, and I was like, oh my God, you know, and obviously I think that an action like that is also more so his insecurity speaking more than anything. But if you're in a role like that, you hold responsibility. And, you know, yes, you're a 5-foot white man, but recognize the role that you've been given and the privilege that you have, and make sure that you use it in the right ways. And, you know, I would argue to say that jumping onto a bench to meet a tall influencer probably is not the way to go. So I have a note here from Tiffany saying, thank you so much. Thank you, Irene. Okay, so if there are any other questions that come up for you.
No, I just wanted to say something. I just wanted to jump in here and thank Irene for being so eloquent and really a driving force, and teaching us all what the next step should be for brands. But also you mentioned that white people should educate themselves and should start knowing and understanding what it is. And I think there's a link between, I mean, I'm obviously not Black, but I know what it is to be different. And that's what I talk about in my podcast, that we, as you just said now, Bree, we have been made fun of for so long, where we're not even allowed to have a story. We're not even allowed to complain that we're black, that we're not black, that we're tall, and that we have issues with it. And you guys have the added, difference that you're, or not difference, but you have the added thing that you're also Black women. So that's even more difficult to have your message go through. So you say that white people should educate themselves and that you shouldn't be also doing the educating. I would defer on that, because I have learned so much in the past few weeks, thanks to Alicia and thanks to Bree and thanks to even other white influencers who have taken the step of, guys, this is what you need to be doing. This is what you need to read. This is what you need to watch. And Bree, it's not the best to have Netflix just tell you, oh, these are your 10 movies you have to watch and then forget about it. It's not the way to go. But with you guys doing what you're doing today for the Black community is helping us tremendously. Like, I have goosebumps. Like, I don't want you to ever stop. Do you know what I mean? Because we need to learn, we want to learn, and sometimes we are clumsy. We don't know what to do, and you guys holding us accountable to, guys, you have to make changes in your brand and you this and you that, is what will drive the change forward. So please don't ever stop.
I just wanted to just clarify, actually, when I said that about the education, that's probably me with my consultant hat on. Sorry, all my doors and windows are open because, yeah, like London is roasting at the moment. So apologies if you the ice cream van outside. But that was me probably speaking with my consultancy hat on and less as TTYA. When I say that in the terms of just like, I meant in the corporate structure, because with the added infrastructure of now, like there being less Black employees in a corporate structure, I don't think it's fair that sometimes it's reliant on those Black employees to educate the other employees within that corporate structure. That's what I meant. I mean, in terms of socials and us sharing things for you guys to read and educate and being open to these narratives, 100% agree with you. But I just feel like in my consultant hat, what we've been seeing is in the corporate structure, actually it's the white employees relying on their Black counterparts to educate them or tell them what needs to change, and with that added stress of just that, actually when you start to look, and I can only speak for the UK, but there's a 3.4 billion pay gap between Black employees and white employees. So then to add on top of that now that we should come and educate you on why your corporate structure doesn't make sense, it doesn't really add up. And that's what I meant. I should have probably clarified that I've got my corporate structure on here, my consultancy structure on, as to per se for TTYA. But I definitely feel like the platform that Bree and Alicia and some of us having using our voices on our platforms to be able to educate is our responsibility as influencers. But I think that it's not the responsibility when you enter into a corporate structure for those Black employees to have to educate their women. I think that's where my views on it tend to shift a little bit.
Thank you, Irene. And if I can add to that as well, I want to make it very clear that, I have chosen to take this step. I have chosen to take this on. I am comfortable in this seat. I'm in this seat on my 9 to 5. So to me, leading a conversation, a discussion, doing a presentation, those are not things that faze me. So I feel compelled to do it because I do believe that it will drive forward positive change. However, I have other Black sisters that are not necessarily comfortable in that seat, and it is not their responsibility to speak out, educate. It's not. It is. I think it is each individual's responsibility to leverage the resources that are out there. We live in a time where, information is everywhere. Make sure that you're looking at the right information, because unfortunately there's also resources out there that might not be either valid or speaking the truth. But, I think it's also very important to recognize the responsibility that we all hold as individuals to make sure that we keep ourselves educated. And that goes for all of us. I grew up in Europe. I wasn't very familiar with the history of my people in the United States. you know, that for me was a learning, because unfortunately going to school in the Netherlands, I didn't learn about slavery in the United States. I just learned about slavery in Europe, and then, you know, the colonies that were held by European countries that me and my ancestors, you know, come from. So we all hold a responsibility to continue to educate ourselves. I'm going to pause there for a moment. I see a note from Lisa from the Nova Collective. She's going to speak on this responsibility piece as well a little bit later on. And then Laura, I know that you have something to share as well.
Hello, yes. Hi, Irene. I haven't actually seen you since probably your launch dinner.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to speak was because basically my mum always said, if you don't have anything nice to say about someone, then don't say anything. But I'm going to talk about Andrew anyway. So I've met him on maybe 3 occasions, a couple of times at his office, that dinner which you sat him next to me for another time. I found him to be incredibly misogynistic. I found that he didn't know how to relate to tall women. I don't know if he was socially just very inept.
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you know, he has almost killed my spirit on a couple of occasions. So I remember once at the Clerkenwell offices, I was walking through and someone said, "Oh, this is Laura from All the Tall Things." And he was like, "Oh, thanks for all the free publicity, babe." And then just walked off. And I was like, "Oh, okay, no worries." And then another time we were sitting at that dinner, I think, and he asked me how many followers I had on Facebook. And I said, "Oh, it's like 2,500. It's not very many." And he went, "Oh, why are you here then?" And I was like, "Because every single one of them is a tall woman and they're all your customer." So I just want to say, I think that you've done amazingly to deal with that kind of person, and kind of person that could massively break you. And I just hope that he hasn't killed your spirit in any way, because you are obviously like a powerhouse and you need to keep TTYA going and do brilliant things with it. So that was like my little tuppence, but I understood where you're coming from with him, because he...
Yeah, do you know what it taught? And I always have this saying of just like, you know, you always learn from certain situations. And I think for me, I learned so much out of that situation. I learned how to go into a boardroom and hold my own. A lot of the times it was literally 6 against 1, you know, and they would always feel like, well, this is how we're going to do it. So it taught me a lot in terms of holding my own, feeling confident to speak out when I knew that something was wrong. But also understanding that actually I don't need them, like, you know, and I felt like that's where they kind of misjudged. They always thought like, oh, well, we're the bigger platform, so, you know, we're doing her a favor, when actually you needed my customers. So actually,
and I don't think they realized that, how much they needed that. They needed to be cooler. And I actually do love a lot of the people that work there and have worked there, like Alice in PR and people like that are lovely. But I think, how can a company move forward and progress when you've got a man like that at the helm, who 100% does not understand his customer and the customers that he should be trying to attract as well? So you did a brilliant job of dealing with that kind of atmosphere.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. So thank you so much, Irene. I would love to kind of pivot and introduce our next speaker that you all know, Alicia J, also known as Miss Tall Swag. Alicia's been creating content for Tall Sisters for literally as long as I can remember. And I remember how excited I was to find her online. And I was mainly following like plus size influencers. We're talking like 6 or so years ago, well before the Tall Society and when bloggers and influencers kind of became a thing. Alicia was the only one that I found that was speaking specifically to me as a tall woman. And for that, I will always be grateful to you, Alicia. You are the true OG. And you embody what it means to stand tall every day in every way. And I know that your faith is at the forefront of everything that you do. And I'm excited for you to share a little bit more with us today.
Bree, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure before I start going. Bree, like, I'm going to get emotional from that introduction. I really appreciate all of those words. And I appreciate everyone being here today, everyone who has supported Tall Swag, who has been inspired by Tall Swag in some way. Honestly, I'm just here because I needed a platform like Tall Swag and at the Tall Society, and I needed Irene's clothes. Like, I needed all of this growing up because I didn't have it. And I think a lot of you can relate to that, if not all of you. I just want to thank you so much for having me here today. I just want to echo what Irene said on all fronts. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself if I tried. And, you know, not to pack on to Long Tall Sally, but I definitely called them out on my platform as well. I wasn't getting any answers as to why there wasn't diversity in their workplace, why I didn't see myself in their brand, and so on and so forth. I've worked with them in the past and called them out then too when there were things that were happening, and they came back with they were closing, and I wanted to take it even further. And we're closing really isn't an adequate response to me. You can still talk about what you haven't done, how you failed, and so on and so forth. And I didn't feel like that was given as well. But Long Tall Sally is definitely someone that I would have continued to call out. And I had called them out while I was working with them and things of that nature. So I guess what I want to say with all of these comments about Long Tall Sally is don't be a Long Tall Sally. Make sure that you have Black people that work in your brands. Make sure not only do you have Black people that work in your brands, but that you also give them a voice, give them the power that they have with their position. That's something that happens a lot of times too. It's happened to me. And I will tell you a little bit about that in a second. But I've definitely been vocal during this time. I do feel like as an influencer, I have to do that. I have to stand tall in who I am. I am a Black woman. I am a tall Black woman. I am a Black woman who has endured through racism. This is nothing new for Black people. It may be new to you within the last couple of weeks, but it is not new to us. There is a systemic racism in this country that is there to, number one, show us that we're Black every day, and also number two, to show us that we're less than human in every way. I completely can sympathize with being different. Everybody knows that I was severely bullied for being tall, but being different and being Black is completely two different things. The color of my skin, without me even saying a word, makes people think that I'm less than human. And that's very different than being just tall. I understand the tall struggle. I would never, ever say that it is always pleasant. And I would never say that rude things like him jumping up to meet you do not happen. It is deplorable and terrible, and people shouldn't do that. But what happens to me as a Black woman is systemic, and it is all of the time. For me, it started when I was 10 years old. We moved from Portland, Oregon to Beaverton, Oregon, two vastly different communities. In Portland, I was in a Black community. And then when I came out to Beaverton, when my parents were divorced, my brother and I were two of like 30 kids in our school district that were of color, not even Black. And I was walking him home one day, and one of my neighbors yelled out the window, "Nigger," at me. And that was the first time that I really remember being like, okay, I'm different in some way, and I don't understand why. And my dad explained it to me at that young age. And I can't tell you how many times I was called that growing up in this community. I can't tell you how many times when I was playing basketball, I was called it. One time my dad pulled me out of a game and we left. I was called a Black bitch by one of my PE teachers. I used to have a teacher bring me up in front of the class and say what a bad student I was. And my parents would go up to the school, she would deny it. And then finally other kids in the class were complaining to their white parents. And that's when it was changed. And that's when she was bounced out of the school. So moving forward, I mean, I could tell you instance after instance after instance of this happening to me. But when I got into the corporate space, man, I can't even tell you how many times, and this was with a sports team. You know, when I went natural, I was asked if it was forever. I was asked if like the hair that was growing out of my head was going to be forever. And I remember meeting an executive one day. It was the first time I was meeting her, and I walked into the room and she went back like this and she said, "Ooh, you intimidate me. I can't," like literally hadn't even spoke my name. And when I say that, make sure that you give people that are in your company the power that goes along with their title, the power, the voice. There are many, many companies that have Black people for numbers, and they don't let them contribute in any way, no matter how hard they try. I was one of those people, and I ultimately had to stand up for myself and leave after specifically 4 intense years of being suppressed for who I was, for being a Black woman. And so, you know, just hiring someone, just putting a picture of a Black woman up for your tall brand. Okay, that's a step, but it's not really eradicating the problems that are happening. It's not having the action to stand up and say, I'm going to be actively anti-racist. Those are completely different things. Specifically in the tall blogging space, it is a small community. Please know that we do swap notes. And, you know, there have been campaigns that tall brands have wanted me to be a part of. And they say that they don't have money to pay, that, you know, they don't have the budget or so on and so forth. And I have went straight to other white bloggers that are doing the same exact campaign that are being paid. So don't tell me that you don't have a budget for me and then give a white blogger money to do the same exact thing that I'm doing. Because for me, this is, and for many of the bloggers on this call, it's a passion of mine. I want tall women to see something that they need to see. Like, I want them to be inspired. I want, like, my younger self, I wanted a platform for my younger self to love who I was and embrace me and my confidence and all of that. And so, like, have I done things for free? Of course, because I want the message to continue. Like, I want to help people with their brands. I want to do that. But when you come at me and say that there's no budget, please believe I'm going to see if that's true. And it's happened more than once. And another thing that has happened that I think you need to be aware of too is I've even been paid by people to make content, and I do that on my platform, and then they don't put it on theirs. And that has absolutely happened time and time again, where it's like, okay, you're paying me to do this, right? And I put in all this work, because it is work. It is work. I put in all this work to put it together and to make sure that the message is beautiful and it pairs with, you know, my platform is, and then also yours. And then you don't even share this stuff on your platform. Like, and that is hurtful, I think, even more than not being paid to me personally, because it's like saying, well, we want to say that we worked with you. We want to say that we've worked with a Black blogger. Like, we want your audience, but we won't put you, you know, on ours. That's ridiculous. And that is, whether it be conscious or unconscious, you're doing that because I am Black. And that's something you have to look within yourself and really dig and see that, because it's there. So I just wanted to share a little bit about those experiences. I still deal with things every day because of the color of my skin, because I have natural hair. And I am exhausted. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I am tired. I'm tired of having to explain why people are racist. I'm tired of having to explain to people that they are racist, or that they have these ideals that they picked up over time and they need to eradicate. I will always continue to stand up and stand tall for who I am. That is never going to change. And just like Bree said, I've also had some disgusting DMs this week, some disgusting comments. And to be honest, it was a highlighter to show me who I don't need to follow and who does not need to be in my community, tall or not. It's
been spring cleaning time.
Yes.
For me.
Yeah. It's really easy for me to block. It's easy for me to unfollow. I'm going to do that unapologetically, because at the end of the day, I also have to protect my space. And I already have enough things to worry about in my space. And I'm not going to worry about your All Lives Matter post. And I've had some knickers in my DMs this past like month or so. And you know what? That's okay. Show me who you are. And so that's what, and I just want to reiterate, like, we've had to deal with racism our whole lives. This is nothing new to us. So please believe that we see what is happening. And we do swap notes. I want you to leave away with that, because it's important to know that you may not think that what you're doing is being seen, but it absolutely is. I mean, and I think we can say that when we're all talking about Long Tall Sally across the board. So we definitely do. And honestly, like, that's all I really have. I'm here to answer any questions. And I just want to say that moving forward, action is what we need. Action is absolutely what we need. I think, yes, I do feel a shift. I absolutely do think that this is a little bit different than any other time that I've seen it within my lifetime for change. But like when sports comes back, when we're able to go out and have like fun again with friends and like all this, do not forget about this. Keep acting. Like all of those points that you put up on for your brands, like carry those out. Keep going, keep your foot on the gas. That is when real change will happen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Alicia. And can you all hear me? Yeah. I was very excited when you went natural as well. It was around the same time that I was making the same shifts, and glad to have shared those struggles. But it's interesting what you mentioned, working in a corporate environment still today. Let's see, we're living on Friday. Just on Wednesday, I was on a video call, and I swapped up I switched it up, and now I'm wearing crochet braids. And I'm in a meeting with probably about 10 executives. And one of my colleagues said, like, oh, look, Bree changed her hair again. Her hair is always so fun. It's always a topic of discussion in our office, just on Wednesday. So I most definitely can 100% relate. And I appreciate you being so transparent and open and speaking truth for everyone that has joined today. So we have an opportunity for questions towards the end, but Tiffany, I know that you've dropped a note in here that you have a question specifically for Alicia. So please go ahead. Definitely want to hear from you. And we can't hear you right now, so you might have to unmute yourself. We can see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Hi, Alicia. Hello, everybody. So I'm kind of the new kid on the block, so just a quick rundown. My name is Tiffany. I live in Hawaii. And for the past 8 years, I've been serving in the greatest Navy ever. as a Black woman, and now I'm a federal worker. So I do a lot of law administrative work and stuff like that for, here in the US. But I'm also a fashion designer. So, I'm new to this. And I'll be honest, I'm very much emotional listening because y'all are saying a lot of the things that have crossed my mind. I'm a curvy girl, and I have a photo shoot tomorrow, and I'm thinking, how will my brand look? Because I'm curvy, Brie. I know you understand that. I have curves and I have natural hair. I straightened it to get my ends clear, but normally I have natural hair, and I'm thinking, okay, Alicia wears her hair natural. Is that okay for me to have pictures like this on my website? Will my clothes sell? Will people respond well to a curvy natural hair girl? And these are my concerns as a new brand, as a new fashion designer. And I'm just wondering, like, I guess you're answering my question. Will they be accepted? Should I continue moving forward? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm articulating that right, but these are my concerns as a new brand of how I'm presenting myself to where it's not, people always view, curves as something not good, but it's natural. It's how I am, and I've dealt with that in the Navy. I deal with it every day when people say, your pants are too tight. No, they fit. I just can't help how I'm shaped. I can't help that I'm well in that. I was naturally born like this, but it's like I always want to tone it down so I'm more accepted. And then as I'm building my brand, I'm wondering how it'll be accepted to other people as a natural girl. So that's really, I'm glad y'all are talking about this, and thank you so much for bringing the topic of hair up, especially.
Alicia, do you want to go ahead and respond?
Yes, I would love to respond. First of all, I hate that you feel that way. I'm just going to be, and I want to challenge other people that are on this call. Like, is that something you've had to think about? Because it's something that we absolutely have to think about on a daily basis. And Tiffany, I just want to tell you, number one, congratulations on starting your new brand. And you're honestly, like, girl, do you, okay? Like, yes, there may be some people who say things that aren't right, that may not follow you because they don't like what they see or whatever, but those aren't your people. Like, my grandmother always told me that. She was like, there are people that are supposed to be in your life and there are people that aren't. And if they don't want to participate in your brand because they don't like your natural hair, you don't want them to participate in it. Right? Like, hopefully their eyes are open at some point and they learn that that ideal isn't correct, but it's not your job to convince people to support who you are. You understand what I'm saying? So put out exactly what you want to put out. Like, you have been given gifts that only you have been given and only you can use in the way that you can use them. So do you, and put out exactly how you want your brand to be portrayed and how you want your brand to be into the world. Like, that's for you to decide. It's yours. So I would just say, show all of your beautiful self, okay, on your brand. Do you, and literally the people that are supposed to support you will be there to support you. And I'll be one of them. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Amazing. And thank you, Tiffany. We're excited to see what you have for us as you develop your brand further. Thank you so much. So I would love to...
Bree, 1 second. Tiffany, can you tell everyone what your brand is? I saw it in the comments. I would just love for you to share with everyone, if you can.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. So my brand, my Instagram is TJL_collection. So I'm a fashion designer. I normally do custom work, but I just got into ready to wear. So now I'll have pieces ready to wear. I was doing fashion design. I have 5 sisters who are over 5'9". And I was just sewing around the way, and people started picking up on that. And I only have 2 hands. So I just started getting into getting things manufactured. And so these are the pieces that I'm going to be releasing July 1st that I got manufactured now. So I'm going into ready to wear from just being a designer. So I do everyday wear, pants, jumpsuits, up to 42-inch inseams, and I'm 6'1" myself, so I definitely understand the struggle.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. And just for everyone's reference as well, I know a few days ago I tagged whoever was slated to attend today, and I'll make sure that when we post a recording, there is a list of who attended and their direct links so that you all can interconnect as well. And so that you can make sure that you follow all of the brands that are on here too. So thank you, Tiffany. Thank you so much, Alicia. So Alicia will still be with us for more questions later on, but I would love to introduce our next speaker, our tall sister, Valerie. So Valerie founded You Belong Now. And You Belong Now is a movement of content creators really advocating for social political justice. And You Belong Now was founded based on the idea of radical inclusion. When we say inclusion, this goes back to some of what we heard from both Alicia and from Irene. When we talk about inclusion and we talk about including everyone, every race, every color, every ethnicity, every religion, every class, every gender, every sexuality, every age, and every body type. Valerie's been advocating for all of us every single day, holding large corporations to the fire and holding them accountable for their missteps. And she absolutely inspires me, and I'm very excited for you guys to hear a little bit more from Valerie.
Hi, everyone. Does my sound good?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bree, for creating this space. I'm excited to talk to everyone, and just really, I feel like this is a continuation of the conversation, which is what's needed, because I think you can see that the feeds are going back to normal. You can see that the news cycles are going back to normal. And so I think it's important to continue to hold these spaces and have these conversations, and like Alicia said, action behind those words. So I'm Valerie Vaughn, like Bree said. I, for a number of years, had a plus size blog called On a Curve, and then founded You Belong Now in 2018 as a direct response to this question of whether there weren't enough Black influencers in the community. And of course, the platform has evolved over the years into this movement. But I just wanted to, first give you some background about the work, and then share a little bit more broadly sort of the goals for this work. And I'll try not to center my story. It is important to hear the stories that Alicia and Irene just shared and Tiffany just shared, because that without those kinds of stories backing up this issue of data or policy or how many Black people are, I think that's been really important to hear. But the work I've been doing is really pulling people together who are working on these different issues in their spaces. And I think one question I've gotten is, is this issue rearing its head up right now because of the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement? Why are people taking this conversation a little bit further, which it seems like it feels different in this moment? And I don't necessarily think that this conversation is happening because of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think this conversation is happening because brands were trying to exploit the Black Lives Matter movement and use it as a marketing ploy to then seem inclusive. And it was a time where if you didn't say anything, or if you didn't have a diversity board set up, if you didn't have some language on your page, you were likely to get called out and lose customers. And I think what we're finding at the end of the day is folks who are posting Black Lives Matter are actually saying our dollars matter. They're posting because they want to do what it takes to stay in business. And I think we're recognizing with this generation that we care a little bit more about who we're buying from. We care a little bit more about who's making our clothes than maybe previous generations did, because they had so much to get past other than just the fashion industry. And I think one thing for me is that a lot of people in fashion, and I talk with folks in all different realms of fashion. This is I think my first time addressing folks in the tall fashion business, is that folks see this issue of diversity and inclusion as separate and distinct from the fight against racial justice in our country as a whole or in the world as a whole. And that's not true. They're born out of the same evil. And so the same sort of racism that allows Tiffany to feel like, oh, maybe I'm not able to wear my hair is the same kind of racism that allows Black girls in schools to get suspended because they wore their hair a certain way, if you can believe it. And that's forcing states like California to pass laws that says you can't discriminate against hairstyle in 2019. And so it's like we have to think of these things as a whole. We have to think of them as intersectional because they are, and we're not distinct and apart just because we're in fashion. And I think sometimes people don't take the issue of racism and discrimination seriously in fashion because it's seen as this sort of frivolous industry. But at the core of it, it's people going to work every day. It's communities, it's business, it's commerce. And so what we're seeing is just the same systems of oppression being replicated in a bubble, in a fashion bubble. So I wanted to just, I guess, lay out that I've heard so many times that there needs to be actionable steps towards change. And I agree with that. A lot of my work outside of blogging is in the social justice field. And I do believe that there has to be a time for speaking up about these issues, and then it has to be a time for actionable steps. But I think what we're finding, and I've had this conversation with Bree many times, is that folks don't want to tell the truth. They want to skip over the hard part of having the hard conversation and move to those actionable steps because that avoids the, I don't know if it's shame, guilt, or whatever, but you can't move forward. I think someone mentioned this before. You can't move forward as a brand and create actionable steps or have a diversity plan or a diversity board if the people leading your company are the same people that this happened under. And so it's not just, I think it's not just something we're hearing. I've heard Long Tall Sally and you know, but it's not just something we're seeing in these set of brands. It's something we're seeing across the board, is that there's no actual, outside of a few people where there's been pressure on the companies, people aren't actually stepping down. The people who these harms, these hurts, these discrimination and racial issues have happened under aren't actually stepping down. They're just putting forward a plan that was probably drafted by some consultant who is doing work on diversity and inclusion. And while that work is important, there's not going to be actually any change if we don't have those hard conversations. What kind of business are you going to be moving forward? And what kind of questions are you going to be posing to yourself, to your leadership team, to your management team? And so that's something I've been thinking about. And in addition to, I think, ending systemic racism and discrimination, I think we have to rethink we have to really reassess what systemic racism means and really understand that it's more than just not having Black women in your campaign. It's more than just not collaborating with Black women. It's the words you use. It's systemic now that it's not intended. It may not be facially discriminatory, but when you say things like it's not our aesthetic, and that really means that you don't want curly hair, or you don't want women who are over a certain size, that's systemic racism. So it doesn't, a lot of people are looking for the smoking gun right now. Like, where's that email from that CEO who said the most racist thing? That often is not even the case. It's this underlying system in the way your brand operates. If your aesthetic is white women with straight blonde hair and skin, and you say, well, that's our customer, that's racism. If you can't look outside of what you already do, that's discrimination. And so it's gonna be, I think, a challenge for people to start to see it that way. And that's why, for a long time, I push this narrative of diversity and inclusion because I do think diversity and inclusion is important. It's how we're actually going to build that community. But what I realize is that's really the end goal. And what is happening is brands are co-opting that narrative of diversity and inclusion because they want to market diversity and inclusion, not necessarily practice it. And so what we're seeing is that there are some brands who actually now are the holy grail of diversity, who have diverse marketing campaigns. But when you look behind the scenes, their executive boards are still all white. The way they treat their employees is discriminatory. Even the Black bloggers that they're hiring, they're not paying them. They're running campaigns using people's platforms and not paying them fairly for their labor. And so that's another issue. It's like, diversity and inclusion is just one part of the problem. What got us to that place that we don't have diversity and inclusion? And I think I'm also challenging people, and You Belong Now is also challenging people to look at issues outside of race. Race has to be centered. It is an issue for so many of us. It's an issue for me as a Black plus-size woman. But I also think we have to start to think about these issues as intersectional. And the issue of exploiting people for their labor is so critical, because what you have now is, in a lot of fast fashion, and I'll just raise this very briefly, is we are exploiting people across the globe, Black and brown people across the globe, then coming into the United States, exploiting the diversity and inclusion narrative to sell it to Black and brown people here, and then exploiting people to sell it to people who fast fashion as at a rate to people who do not need some things because of this narrative of consumerism. And at the end of the day, the only people that really benefit are the people in those C-suites and executive board, which are typically majority white people. And so we have to start to see these issues as interconnecting, because if you solve the diversity and inclusion narrative over here, but your treatment of Black and brown people across the world is exploitative, and you're not actually addressing that issue, I don't care how diverse your brand is. If you treat me well, but you don't treat other Black people across the world well, I don't care how bad, I don't care how diverse your brand is. And I think brands have to start realizing that people see that now. Just slapping a Band-Aid on it is not going to fix it. People are going to call you out about the exploitative practice, the exploitative, oh my gosh, that word, practices at your brand. And then I think another thing that, I'm really trying to focus on is building coalition with other folks who are doing this work in their areas. So I think that the work to consult with brands on diversity and inclusion, on changing their culture is important. I think the work that folks are trying to do on sustainability is important. The work that folks are trying to do on ending pollution when it comes to fast fashion is important. And what we're doing is we're finding all of these people and building coalition to come together, because ultimately the power is in those numbers. The power is with those people. And, like Irene said earlier, when you approach a lot of brands, the first, you sort of feel that they feel that you're less than. They feel like, well, we're this corporation, you're just this one person. And I think that's the difference in this moment, is that people are building, they realize it's not going to be a one approach fix to this problem. They are building power across all these different issue areas. And so I always tell folks that, let's organize among ourselves, right? When I go to when I've had meetings with brands, and the CEO of Eloquy, or the co-founder and creative director, asked me for an off-the-record private FaceTime meeting, I said no. I said, if you want to have a meeting with me, I'm going to have all these people that have said you have harmed them in some way. Because what happens is they want to get you to agree to something. They want to offer you a deal. They want to offer, and they may not even be saying, I want to offer you a deal as some kind of shady thing. They just want to see what it's going to take for you to stop talking. And I think what we're realizing is that we're not going to stop talking, because even if you treat me well, if you don't treat all these other people well, and you're not addressing all these other concerns, that's not going to be enough. And I think a lot of brands are not understanding that diversity and inclusion, that narrative, is so 2018. It was what sparked You Belong Now. It was what sparked the issue against Revolve. That narrative is done, I think, for so many people. It's not that we don't want diverse and inclusive brands, is that at this point, it's what kind of business are you? Are you really a business that can't function without exploiting people? Are you a business that can't function without discriminating against people? After we've laid out all these problems, if your fix is a diversity board, well, you don't need to be in business until you can understand sort of the harm that you're causing to people around this country, around this world. And so, yeah, it's just, I think the overriding purpose is sort of the overriding purpose test. And I need to figure out, like, how to actually frame that for people is, are you in business, for the tall brands to create a community for women who have been excluded for so long? Is that your purpose? Or are you in business to make a profit at any cost? And I think that when you begin to ask yourselves those questions, you realize, okay, these are the changes I need to be making. Because I think people, I'm not saying, anybody in particular on this call, but when we go into these spaces, into these rooms, the response from these brands, you can tell that they're just trying to figure out, all right, how do I keep the profits coming in? Like, what do I need to say to make sure like this goes away and blows away? And it's not blowing away, because, what I've noticed is, I've heard from different people in the activism space, in the fashion space, is this feels different. It does feel different, but I'm sure it felt different for folks in the 1800s when slavery ended. I'm sure it felt different, in the 60s during the civil rights movement. And it feels different now because that wave is picking up. And I talked to Brie about this as well. It's picking up new people. So will it change in my lifetime? I don't know. Will it change in 5 and 10 years? I don't know. But what I do know is there are people who now know that aren't going back to the same mind frame. Because once you know that this is the way it has to happen, I think people sort of get empowered. And that's what, a conversation like this, I haven't seen a conversation where brands sit down and say, I'm just going to listen to what these issues are. Now, what you take from it, it's entirely up to you and the brand that you work for. But I think people feel a little more empowered to talk about these things in a straightforward way. So I'm gonna, just wrap there and stop there. But I think I can't remember the study, but there is a study out that millennials, especially this generation, care more about who the brand is than the product you're actually making, because there's been a call for folks to buy Black in the past 2-3 weeks, and that's important as well. But what you're realizing is you don't have to get your products from these huge conglomerates who often buy up independent designers, and because of their huge marketing budgets, they're allowed to just dominate in a way that nobody else can. And so people are seeking out independent designers. They're seeking out your values. They're seeking out, when I go on a lot of brands, even if they are Black brands, I always look, where are your clothes made? I always look down. If I don't see it, I DM the brand, like, where is it made? Is it, even if it's not local, can you trace the manufacturer? Brands like H&M, whose campaigns are so diverse now, and who have a global equity, diverse coordinator around the world and in the United States, the people who work for them are making cents on the dollar, can't afford to eat, can't afford to send their children to school. And so how can I celebrate diversity when that's happening? So I'll stop there, Brie. And I know we're almost at 12:30. So again, excited to talk to you all, and thankful to Brie for creating this space.
I'm thankful to you for sharing some of your wisdom. And I think that I'm excited to talk about the action portion, because I think that is what most of us are eager to hear. So we will get to that shortly. So I'd like to transition over to Lisa, and we'll have a little bit more time for questions following that. So as I was trying to formulate what the best format would be for us to have this conversation, I also recognize that the action piece is the most important part, because although I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us and listen to the stories, I am eager to hear from you, specifically Tall Brands, but also other influencers that are here, what you are going to do next. So with that, Lisa Beasley is a co-founder of the Nova Collective, and the Nova Collective is a Black women-founded business, and they are experts when it comes to diversity and inclusion, active anti-racism, supplier diversity, and a whole slew of resources that I believe can be helpful specifically to the brands that we have on today. So I invited Lisa to talk a little bit about how Denova Collective can maybe support your businesses, small and larger, and we'll go into questions after that. Miss Lisa?
Yeah, hey you all. It's really nice to be on this call and hearing everybody's story. I do want to say to all the Black women that shared your story, I kept cutting my camera off because I was getting emotional, because it's one of those things where it's validating every time. It's validating and equally painful every time you hear another story from a Black woman, because in 2016, I thought I was going crazy. I was like, wait a minute, a little bit about my story, and I'm sure this group will love to talk to me again, and we will. I grew up in Gary, Indiana. I went to an historically Black college and university, and then I went to acting school. So my passion is acting. I'm a performer, I'm an entertainer. A lot of women in this inclusion work didn't grow up wanting to be an inclusion expert. They wanted to do something else. And the ability to not be able to do it is what drove them to this work. So I didn't come in contact with white people until I was 21. So my hair was never an issue growing up. My skin was never an issue growing up. And then it was an issue. So sometimes how like white people are like, oh, systemic racism, what is that? That's kind of how I was when I was like, wait a minute, you've never seen a Black person? This is weird. So I get the feeling of being duped. I get the feeling of, wait a minute, I spent my whole life doing X and now I have to flip the script and do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Yes. So I want to talk about specifically what we do, how we help people, why we help people, and ways to work with us. I do want to start off by also saying, normalize paying Black women for their work. Normalize paying Black women for their work, for their expertise, and for their contributions. In the past 3 weeks, I've had a lot of, people reaching out to me. And it's so interesting. What I'm finding out is that when it comes to figuring out the arrangement, the contract, the payment, it's almost as if that's really not even in their mind to even think about. They want to jump right into the work. And I hear myself saying things like, these are all great ideas, but first let's firm up the arrangement and see what this contract is, because they always want me to start working before we talk about how much I'm getting paid. Our prices mirror prices of large corporations, because that's what we are. I used to be down for the $250 hollers, but that is not us. I'm 34. I have a daughter. I have a broken air conditioner that costs $6,000 to fix. We are all adults. And that is one of the reasons why Black women are like, pay us. For an entire year, I wore a shirt that said, pay me, because I was confused as to why I didn't have basic needs met, but I was out here being awesome. And by being awesome, what I mean is, so I'm the co-founder and creative director for our company. And what that means is, along with just the basic, operations of the business, the values, making sure we're all set, as a creative director, I go into small and large companies and help them with their creative initiatives around how they're going to roll out something, how they want to market inclusion to their people. And I work with their creative teams. Here's the thing. I don't have a degree in graphic design. So I'm leading teams of people who wouldn't hire me for their company. The talent retention. We need more Black people, access to the talent pipeline. So in terms of expertise, we work with Northwestern experts, people who are like at the top of their field. It's on the who we are section of our website. We are 2 Black women, 2 white women who came together to start a company because we all had terrible experiences at work. The average person spends 90,000 hours of their lifetime at work, and most people hate their job because most companies are founded in white supremacist values. And when that happens, the work is tainted, the job environment is tainted, even if it's a homogenous atmosphere. I have never seen so many people not want to go to work than corporate people. And it's really confusing. It was one of those things where I knew I had the high level brain to do it, but I couldn't get down with the culture. I'm laid back, I'm chill. The whole performative aspect of being bubbly and being happy all the time is just hard for me to keep up. I can't do it, so I didn't do it. What we believe is that it's not going to take one workshop to fix it. We actually hate the words diversity and inclusion. We only use it because that's how people who know those words can find us. And what we do, okay, so we help the individual all the way up to if your company has 100,000 employees. We know how to scale information and help people. If you're a company of 2, if you're a company of 30, if you're a company of 30,000, we have resources for you and for your people. One of the main things and one of the main people we support are the Brees, the Alicias, the Valeries, the Tiffany's, in that they've decided that, like, yes, I can be a voice in this work, but I don't have all the resources. I don't have all the expertise. I don't have all the data. I don't have all the D&I strategists. I don't have all of the means to create infrastructural change for real. So what that means is we help those people, because oftentimes what happens is in large companies, when it comes up that they need diversity and inclusion, they find the first Black woman in the company and say, let's have you head up diversity and inclusion. They're also an accountant, so they have to do both jobs. Sometimes it's a voluntary position. And I find it so funny because my company, we have it's about 11 employees and about 50 independent contractors. And they're asking one Black woman to do a lot of work. And people don't realize that it is a lot of work. We work with HR departments. We work with learning and development departments. We learn by industry. We help by industry. And we also help people like you who are just like, okay, we want the information. We need it. Who we don't help, we have had calls where people are like, yeah, so our Black employees ran a coup and there's a mutiny and we just want to show them that we care. So can you just like help us make this go away? We will say no. So when it comes to taking direct action with us, why it is important. The accountability that Bree is calling for and the taking action, here's why it's really important. Because we are tired, we are exhausted. Alicia's only job should be being beautiful and tall, not being the voice of the Black women generation to make people believe that Black women matter. It should just, I just want to be tall, right? It also shows that you will have an active voice in your community that can reach farther than you know. I have deleted people who purposely won't say Black Lives Matter because I'm like, you never know who is in your bubble who needs to know where you stand. There is a difference between whether you say it or not. I'm getting into educating territory and you haven't paid me yet, so I'm just gonna go back to what we do. So we have individual session offerings. This is something new. When COVID struck, we had to move all of our things virtual and we were like, well, this will be a good time to do individual courses. And then the need became stronger. So we have an individual session option. I'm gonna actually drop that link in the chat. This is something everybody just needs to be signing up for ASAP because once you see like the facilitators we have and everything, it really is a good opportunity to get some basic knowledge out of the way because you're gonna be learning for the rest of your life, if I'm being honest. It sounds daunting because it is. It sounds challenging because it is. It's uncomfortable because it just is. And we set things up for uncomfortable conversations. So we don't throw anybody into the weeds. We don't hop on a call and say, why don't you know this already? We are assuming people are coming in not knowing a lot because a lot of information wasn't shared with you to begin with. And it's not anyone's fault. Except for white supremacy. So it is somebody's fault. But when it comes to individual learning, there can be a lot out there where you're like, I don't know what to look at. And there's so many messages because You see major platforms giving you recommendations. Then you go on Twitter and see Black people saying, I don't know why they telling them to watch The Help. That ain't gonna help. And it's just like, well, what do I do? You need to learn the basics and fundamentals of a lot of terms outside of unconscious bias. When diversity and inclusion popped up, when it was like the hot thing in 2 years ago, like Valerie said, it was all about every company needing to get unconscious bias training. That is one term of about at least 20 that have a direct impact on Black women, people of color, the LGBTQ community, and so forth and so on. So it's a lot of other things like dominance and oppression, those big scary words that we don't want to talk about, the socioeconomic class difference. I grew up extremely poor, way under the poverty line. For the longest, I thought it was something me and my family weren't doing. And then I learned about redlining and how we are only forced to be able to, I only had so many opportunities. The reason I am where I am now is because of art classes as a child. And I tell people that I'm about 2 art classes away from being somebody who's looting in the street. So I'm not far removed from the life. But what I find is in our work, socioeconomic class difference is the hardest thing for people to talk about. Talking about money, pay gaps, pay inequalities is so hard for people to discuss, and it makes people extremely uncomfortable. And I think with this new wave picking up where we're like, it's not just about police brutality, everything is messed up. A lot of people are realizing like, oh, I do have privilege in a lot of different areas where me being able to go to the bank and get a loan or get a car, or how for some reason people who have money, it's less expensive for them to live. So we cover things like that. And I could talk a little bit more about how we help companies on the larger side. But I see some questions popping up. So I would love to take some questions. About how, another thing, something you can immediately do is share what we do. I am a person that is unapologetically like, share what we do. And we have our individual offerings here because I also want, especially in this work, not only do I want to do it, but I only want to do it because we're getting paid for it. I found out that I had a very passionate need for this because of my troubles in the entertainment and acting industries that mirror the same thing, hair and headshots, type, all that stuff. And I said, if I'm going to be doing this much educating, it has to be a business because people get paid a lot to consult. So I'm going to drop the just like our Instagram for people to see. Feel free to share. We are a cool resource. I could send some articles. The main thing we want people to know about us is that, I can't think of a better way to say it, but we not with the shits. And a lot of diversity and inclusion companies get bad reps because they are helping companies do things just for show. With us, you're on a longer road. People come to us asking for one thing and we recommend what they actually need. For example, if someone is like, we need more Black talent, we say, hold up. Why don't you have it in the first place? Let's go and look at your hiring practices. Let's go look at your values. Let's go look at your infrastructure of your company. So, any questions?
Thank you so much, Lisa. I see that Jade had a question for Lisa. Jade, we can see you, but we can't hear you. I think you're muted. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, Lisa. So thank you for hearing. It's really good hearing about your business. Just a quick question as a Londoner and a Black Londoner. Is your business US race relations based, or do you have people that can speak about the UK? Because I feel like it is super different. Oppression is oppression, but I feel like there are different nuances regarding the fact that slavery wasn't prominent in the UK, and more that majority, if not all, Black people that are based in the UK were actually invited, with like the Windrush generation and the Caribbean being invited post World War II. So do you have any kind of resources for white-led UK-based brands and how their race or diversity policies can be implemented effectively in the UK?
Yes, that is a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention we are global. So because some of the companies we work with have global brands and global divisions, and we have helped some people launch global initiatives. And what that looks like for us as with US based founders, we educate people on global cultural competency. So we'll have an expert in that field or in that space. And then when we're like building a curriculum, sometimes we do just have to sit down and have a session of like, okay, here's how we say it. How do y'all address it? And it is two different things. Something that we find offensive here is actually just literally the language there. So yeah, we do have, and we break stuff down in different languages if we need to. So the answer is yes.
Okay, brilliant. Just wanted to like double check.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jade. So I'd like to open it up. I know that we've gone way over, but I am totally okay with it. I think that this conversation is one that is absolutely needed, and I'm looking forward to continuing this dialogue with all of you. I'm not sure if Irene is still on, but if there's any questions specifically for her, I'm happy to pass those along, and you can find her in social and ask her directly. Are there any other questions or comments for either myself or our speakers today? Jade, I see you putting up your hand. Do you want to unmute? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, let me unmute. Just based on Tiffany's point that she's mentioned earlier about kind of like branding as a new brand. Oh, for those of you that don't know, my name is Jade. Hi. I run a tall fashion brand that launched in November, called Rosanna London. And when I think it's interesting to see how your personal experiences go into your brand. So just like being black, growing up black in London, but I went to school in Kent. And for those of you that don't know, Kent is a excessively predominantly white area. So I was like one of 4 black people in my class, and that kind of thing, going from a very prominent black area where I live and kind of socialized to going to school in a white area definitely affected me, I think a lot more than I thought. And even the fact that for my first photo shoot, I chose 2 black models, and I had a conversation with my mentor who's white, and she said that maybe that could be a problem regarding that when shopping, it's really important for you to be able to see yourself in the clothing and be able to identify with the messaging behind the brand and imagine yourself wearing the clothes. So I'd just like to say to Tiffany that I completely understand it is a really weird thing to have to think about, the fact that even though me as a tall black woman, I don't see myself in the majority of black brands, but I have to consider the fact that I think just consider the fact that people might not see themselves in my clothes, but most brands don't consider me. I hope I'm making sense. So it's a weird thing to kind of consider as a new brand owner, but it's just one of those things, I think. I hope I'm being quick. I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but that was just like a quick point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Jade. And Lisa, I'm not sure if Lisa, Alicia, or Irene, Valerie, anyone wanted to respond to that? No? Okay. I will respond to it. And Jade, I understand where you're coming from. You are making sense. I think that both on the brand and the influencer end, we also still have some learning to do. And it is interesting when you say that brands, black brands, or brands that appear to be black brands, still do not have the representation that you would expect. And I think Eloquy is probably a really good example of that, Valerie. That's our most recent culprit, in the sense that that brand has been built on the backs of black women, specifically plus size and curvy influencers. If you see the leap in growth that they've experienced over the past couple of years, it is exponential. And it has been on the backs of black women. Yet here we are today, still struggling to get straight answers from them when it comes to holding their feet to the fire and asking them specifically on what they're doing. Instead, they're reaching, this is a huge, LK is a huge brand, and some of you might have seen me promoting them and talking about them because I wear their clothes. I'm one of their customers, and I've worked with them. But I have been particularly disappointed in how they've moved through the world, specifically most recently. And they are an example of a brand that reached out to Valerie in this case and said, hey, why don't we have a one-on-one conversation, wanting to take it out of the public eye. And that's one of the main reasons that I am recording this town hall. You are all here. It's an open conversation. I'm going to be posting it. Anyone can go and listen to what we discussed. I think it is crucial that we hold each other accountable. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more if there's no more questions. Let's see, we're at almost a 2-hour mark here, which is awesome. But are there any more questions before I go into kind of next steps?
I just wanted to add a little quick thing. What you said, Bree, reminded me that Black women are the backbone of culture. And there is a difference between, it's okay to specify between Black women and women of color. And I think that's what this Black Lives Matter movement is really about, is when we focus our initiatives on women of color, Black women can sometimes be excluded from that. So I just wanted to make sure, like, as you're taking your accountability plan and your next steps, also still be thinking of ways to, yes, build a diverse pool, but remembering that centering the women, the voices of Black women in specifically is important, and it's a whole nother move in itself.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you for making that distinction, because it's absolutely an important one that we sometimes forget. Okay, so today you've all had an opportunity to kind of listen, learn, take all these stories in, ask questions. But what is next is really, what are you doing? And this goes for both brands and bloggers. You were not asked for specific action items today, but I would like to invite you all to return on Friday, July 31st at 11 a.m., same time on a Friday, and share with us what progress you've made. What commitments have you made? What have you read? What have you learned? How are you planning to retool either your brand, your organization, or how are you going to be more conscious moving forward on your blog and on your platform, and continuing to be an active part of this conversation? So we're recording this session, as you all know. I'm going to make sure and post it. It will be available on untitled.com/BLM, which was the same site where you went ahead and signed up. It will be available to everyone to listen back. And I look forward to reconnecting with all of you on July 31st. And I also want to call out and say, be ready to speak on specifics when that day comes. A huge thank you to Irene, Alicia, Valerie, Lisa. I appreciate you taking the time today and share a piece of yourself. And I look forward to seeing everyone on July 31st. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Stop the recording so you guys can curse right after.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.